button here. And you are going to be able to watch this on Facebook and our other social media sites afterwards. First of all, I want to thank all of our first responders. So we have a lot of members that are on the front lines. We really want to thank them. Right behind me, you may be able to see it. It's the CDC, and aren't we lucky to have the CDC right here in our backyard here in Atlanta. So earlier this month, we had a huge, BYR won 2 awards. We won Chapter of the Year for 2020, and I was able to win Man of the Year. But it's really that Chapter of the Year, which I'm most proud of, because I want to thank all of the members, all of our sponsors, everyone that has come out to our meetings over the years, over this past year. But I especially want to thank our executive board. I think that they're the best exec board that I could ever ask for. They do so much behind the scenes, and they really do a tremendous job putting on events. So just to give you a short timeline here, we're looking at August and September to get back to meetings. So obviously we are at the mercy of local, state, and federal regulations and guidelines, making sure that we can have social distancing. I have been in contact with the Ivy, which is our headquarters where we have our monthly meetings, and we are in the midst of negotiating some events in the fall. So just stay tuned. However, we're not going to be waiting till August or September to keep you involved. So we've got some fun, the BYR mugs. We handed these out for the State of the Union Watch Party, which was cool. We've got hats, and it's summertime, so get your beach towel out. So we've got some other fun stuff going on to keep you involved, and just stay tuned for fun stuff like that. So tonight's format is I'm about to introduce our speaker for tonight, and but just to let everybody know, everyone that's on the chat is muted. And how we're going to do Q&A is that, at least for this first meeting, it might change with time, and I hope it does, but for this first meeting, if you have a question, just go ahead and send it on the chat. So when we get to Q&A, and if it's a topic that we have yet to cover, we will get to your question. But without further ado, let me go ahead and introduce our keynote speaker here tonight. He has been in the Georgia House of Representatives really since 1993. He was in the House from 1993 to 2001. He was the DeKalb CEO from 2001 to 2009. He's currently in the House of Representatives representing the 91st District, which is Lithonia in DeKalb County. He's a businessman. He's gone ahead and has national notoriety because of his endorsement of President Trump. So I really want to thank Representative Vernon Jones for joining us here tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kristen, and thank you for having me on your show and all of you participants that are here. I hope I don't disappoint you. And I think it's an amazing thing how technology has allowed us to still continue to have dialogue and conversation during this pandemic crisis. And so I'm here, and let's just get into it.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I just want to check in with you. How's you and your family doing during the coronavirus? Everyone doing okay?
Well, let me back up. Don't ever bring me on you playing the boss, okay? I get carried away, so hope I didn't embarrass myself by dancing. I just couldn't take it. But unfortunately, I lost my mom about a week and a half ago. She was buried just a day before I announced my endorsement for President Trump. And it was kind of awkward because it hits home how this pandemic crisis can affect people. Although my mom was not a coronavirus patient, but she did pass, and fortunately I was there with her the day of. She had been in the hospital. I couldn't see her, and finally I demanded, wanted to escalate me being able to see her. And I understood the restriction, and luckily I did, because when I got there, within about 25 minutes, my mom passed right before my eyes. So I'm still dealing with that, obviously. And after, we went home for the funeral. We took her back to North Carolina. We couldn't have the traditional funeral, few people at the graveside. And so we're dealing with that. And but other than that, my family, the rest of my family, other than grieving, we're safe, we're sound, and we're practicing keeping safe during this pandemic environment.
Well, I'm very sorry to hear that, and thoughts and prayers. A lot of us are.
You're going in and out.
Can you hear me?
I can now.
Yeah, I know that a lot of people are feeling the pain, and we give you thoughts and prayers for sure. So let's go ahead and get right into it. So a couple of weeks ago, you made the decision to endorse President Trump, and so kind of describe what kind of went into that decision. Because I'm sure that was a decision that kind of a long time to make.
Okay, Kristen, I turned my volume up some to try to hear you better, but you still kind of garbled like. I don't know if I'm the only one that's hearing that, but um,
Okay, maybe if I move
okay,
it,
that sounds good.
am I good?
Yeah, they're much better, much better.
Okay, good. I'll talk a little bit louder too. Uh,
Okay.
so let's talk about your decision to endorse President Trump. Can you tell us a little bit about why you made that endorsement and some of the reasons why you made that endorsement?
Well, two reasons primarily. One, this president has demonstrated the type of leadership that I look for in a president. And two, he's been results oriented. President Trump has done what he said he's going to do. And more specifically, if I were to zero in on it, what he has done for all Americans, those who are willing to work and want to work with the economy, record number of unemployment, record number of stocks from the stock market, the records have been broken there. At the same time, how he's put America first as it relates to investing in our country as opposed to sending out a lot of resources to other countries around the globe and not recognizing that they should be participating with their fair share. So I like that about him too. But bringing back home specifically as an independent thinking black man, I like the fact that what he did with the criminal justice reform, because we all know that Joe Biden passed a crime bill and it disproportionately affected African Americans. I like the fact that the First Step program is giving many those who were in jail an opportunity to come back, reunite with their family, start their life over again, get that second chance, and be able to work and take care of their family. Also, I'm a proud graduate of North Carolina Central University, which is an HBCU, historical black college. And black colleges and universities before blacks go to majority schools, they were the training and breeding ground of scholars in science, arts, math, engineering, religion, politics. And so that right there showed me that this president, when he said what do you have to lose by supporting him, really he's demonstrating in 3.5 years what we've gained, the whole country has gained, and certainly the African American community.
No, right, and you actually received, unfortunately, a lot of backlash from the endorsement of President Trump. I mean, the Georgia State director of the Democratic Party came out and called you embarrassing. And so my question is, what does she not like record unemployment, not like criminal justice reform, and obviously this is COVID-19, but you describe some of the backlash that you've been receiving in your party.
What I found out, and I've been knowing this for a while, I've always been an independent thinker. I've always been in alliance with my party. The Democratic Party left me. I didn't leave the Democratic Party. I look at what Zell Miller did back in when he supported President Bush for his reelection and spoke at the Republican National Convention. So he didn't get ostracized. He wasn't told to leave the party, or he wasn't censored for what he had to say. But it just goes to show you, and I too voted for President Bush, George W. Bush, but show that the Democratic Party, they talk about the tent of diversity and inclusion, but they really don't have room under that big tent for independent thinking, black or black male or female. It's obvious that they put illegals before they put American families. And that is not something that I agree with in our party. And that's another stand, again, President Trump was willing to put Americans first. And my Democratic Party, they've gotten so far to the left, so radical with their socialist ideas, I cannot in good conscience continue to not speak out about that. And so, yes, they made some disparaging comments, and there was a barrage of them. But when I look at the ones who were doing all the talking, they don't have a record of accomplishments like I have. They've not done the things I've done to improve the quality of life, not only as a local county executive, but also when I served in the Georgia legislature first time and coming back. I'm a firm believer of the second right, a believer of the Second Rights Amendment. I believe in the right to bear arms. also believe in less regulations. And when I see the Democratic Party continuing regulations and how they fight against the First Amendment, Second Amendment, and actually against the First Amendment, because I can't exercise my freedom of speech in terms of who I want to support in this presidential race. And so I don't like the way they have been treating my fellow colleagues around the country. You look at the Michigan, there's a state legislator there, she simply said, Democrat, black female, she simply said, I thank President Trump because, as you know, she had the coronavirus. And she was censored, and she was really received a barrage of attacks. Over in Tennessee, I have another colleague in the House of Representatives who happens to be a minister who's pro-life. He is also for school choice, and the Democratic Party just recently removed his name from the ballot. And so when you see things like that happening, again, the party didn't leave us. We didn't leave the party has left us. And I just decided I just didn't want to be a part of something like that without speaking out.
Yeah, and I apologize to you if there's a little bit of static. I can hear
Yeah.
you know, I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. And we're going to get to some of your colleagues across the country that are supporting you. But can you describe a little bit of the support that you've had in your district? Because you went ahead and you resigned, you unresigned, and you come from DeKalb County, which is a very Democratic area. So can you describe your decision to unresign from your seat?
Well, after I received such negative remarks and comments and emails and calls from those within the Democratic Party's ranks, I decided I just would not complete my term. And then, and I would have, I would have to go on as a civilian, but my efforts were to continue to support President Trump and help him get reelected. But then I got so much support, not only from my district, from fellow Georgians and from people around the country, great Americans and patriots, who was saying to me, look, at least finish out your term if you don't want to seek reelection. So I decided to come back to finish out my term. And actually, in that particular situation, that allows me to continue to agitate them, to continue to be a part of it. I'm a co-sponsor of the immigration bill that I'll give a chance. Hopefully we bring it up when we go back in our special session that targets those violent criminals and to ensure that they have no sanctuary, that they have to be reported to ICE and be deported from this country. And that was another issue that they were very upset with me about. And I caught a lot of heat, but it was okay. Again, I wanted to put my country before my party. And that's all that mattered to me. And it's my convictions, it's how I feel.
Yeah, and I just want to make sure we've got some people that, can everyone hear me okay? Put a thumbs up if you can hear me. Okay. No?
Yeah, me too. It's kind of.
No?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. Is this a little bit better?
Yeah.
I'll just talk to you like this if this is a little bit better. I'm sorry if it's a little static, but we're working through it. So
you're just kind of going in and out, and it's kind of stagnated. That's how it's coming from.
Oh, I apologize.
I was wondering, can they hear me well?
I can hear you fine. I think
they said they can hear me okay.
Yeah. I'll ask you another question, and I'll try a microphone out. But yesterday I saw that you, in a Washington Examiner article, said that you are accusing your party of voter suppression. And so I was kind of surprised because you kind of hear a lot about Stephen Abrams, who I don't even know if he's the election yet for the governorship. But I mean, she just came out and went ahead and accused in New York because they canceled the primary of voter suppression up there. And so, can you just talk a little bit more about using the Democratic Party voter suppression?
She has been more or less like an issue looking for a cause. When you want to look at real voter suppression, it's those people who have the opportunity and their God-given right to come out and vote, and for whatever reason, maybe because of voter apathy or they're just not impressed with the candidates, most people just stay home and don't come out and vote. It has nothing to do with voter suppression. What is ironic, though, when she talks about carrying the mantle and accusing everyone else of voter suppression, if me or any other candidate in the Democratic Party does not carry her tune or dance to her music, she goes and funds and supports your opponent. So in other words, she's trying to silence me and others who can make our own choice in terms of who we want to vote for. And so that's the real voter suppression. And that's why I've said many times, even within the Democratic Party, if you don't just dance to their music and can't have an independent thought, then you're ostracized. And I mean this not literally, but literally. The Democratic Party is full of bigotry. And the Democratic Party is being run by plantation owners and those blacks who won't stand up because they're afraid of being browbeat like they tried to do me. They're really plantation workers. So I hope one day they do like I did and just say, hey, look, I don't want to live this sweet anymore. They can have this sweet, turn the lights off, I'm out of here. They're not going to silence me on how I feel. What my thoughts, I was born and reared on a farm in North Carolina with conservative values. Again, the Second Amendment is important to me. Traditional marriage is important to me. Not that I disagree with someone else wanting to do what they want to do with their lives, but me personally, and I should be able to feel that way without being taken to task. I believe in small business. I believe in less regulations and cutting taxes, allowing for the private sector to grow jobs, not the government to grow jobs. The government should be running a much more efficient, effective operation. Our credit, America has lost its dual AAA credit rating. That tells you they haven't been managing their affairs properly. I believe in a balanced budget. At the local level in states, most states, you have to balance a budget. You can only spend what you're taking in. And so unless there's emergency, I can see outside spending, but for the most part, there should be a balanced budget. That's how I was reared. That's nothing new to me. People who know me know that's how I am. But again, the Democratic Party, because they've left me, they've gone so far left. Can you imagine Zell Miller being a part of this party? Can you imagine John F. Kennedy being a part of this party in the state it's in now? And so, again, I'm not going to be silenced. Try washing your clothes without an agitator, you'll come out with wet, dirty clothes. So I feel like me speaking out, I'm the agitator, and I'm whipping them back into shape. They're not whipping me out of shape.
Yeah, it seems as though that, like, I was always taught to judge people on the content of their character, but not on the color of their skin. I mean, you can take that from any speech Martin Luther King made, but it seems as though that in the Democratic Party, that if you are a certain social group, if you're Black, Hispanic, or LGBTQ, you have to vote for that. So to kind of speak as a lifelong Democrat yourself, you kind of speak to that kind of mindset of the Democratic Party.
Well, let's be truthful. If anyone sees a Black person walking down the street and ask them what party they more likely belong to, honestly, they'll say Democrat. And most of the time, I would say 90% of the time, they're right. Again, because the Democratic Party has pretty much held them hostage, that liberal wing, liberal whites making Blacks feel as though we can take care of you, we can think for you, let us tell you what you need. We'll build you a habitat house, not in our neighborhood, but we'll still look out for your housing. And that is not that is not how a lot of African Americans were reared. But when you look at the liberal media want to paint Trump as a racist who let white people out of jail with the First Step Act. But here on the other hand, Joe Biden is the savior. Joe Biden is the one who helped craft and shepherd that bill through to create a disproportionate amount of African Americans in jail with these egregious prison sentences where the time doesn't fit the crime. And so if we're going to call it like it is, Donald Trump doesn't care. He's an equal opportunity offender. He doesn't care what color you are. He doesn't care where you live, what your gender is, anything. He speaks his mind. We may not agree with everything he says, but again, I go back to what's most important to me, and that's being results driven. Joe Biden has been a United States Senator for almost 36 years and 8 years as vice president. I can't think of any one thing that he's done to really move the ball in this country in comparison to what Donald Trump has done in the past 3.5 years. And that's why it's important to give him another 4 years.
Yeah, as you mentioned, you have a colleague in the Michigan State House, who went ahead and she thanked President Trump for using hydrochloroquine, and because she got the coronavirus, and she thought that saved her life. And you take a look at what kind of backlash she's going through, it's very similar to what you're experiencing. And so do you think that maybe this could be the beginning of almost like a great awakening, almost like a black way, where you're going to see, maybe not in 2020, but maybe in future elections where you have the African American community actually start voting Republican.
You know, I think President Trump is probably the first, going back to Richard Nixon, that has really didn't mind standing on the stage and say, hey, I want to help African Americans, and follow through with it. The Democratic Party says it until they get elected, and then you're left to get crumbs. Just think about it. When you look at the Democratic Party and what they've really done to the African American community, they've really detached their families. They've done things to cause them not to be able to want to have their own, work on their own, have their own business. It's been about pushing the government so they can continue to be dependent upon them. My mom and dad, where they reared me, was the only thing the government can do for us is get the hell out of our way so we can continue to have our exercise our constitutional rights and have our civil liberties. And that's where that's where a lot of African Americans were reared, but they got tricked by the Democratic Party because they want to tell you that Republicans are racist, Republicans don't like you, and that tactic really works. It's been working for the past 60 years. I think me coming out, and others are starting to come out too, I think there was a shockwave through this country. No one saw it coming, no one expected it. And you know, there are a lot of my colleagues that feel that way all across the country. I know because they've called me and say they feel the same way too. A lot of whites want to say, hey, I'm for Donald Trump, but they don't want to be called a racist because the liberal news media made, if you support Trump and you're white, you're a racist too. And then blacks, and African Americans, I should say, or blacks who want to support President Trump, they can't say anything publicly because they'll be called a Republican. And white liberals get blacks to attack blacks to keep them on the plantation. That's the oldest trick in the book. And so I'm not calling anyone a racist. Let me say this. I'm going to call them racist. That's a hard word, but I can tell you some of their actions and some of their deeds and some of their intellectual dishonesty is clearly pointed out that they have just trapped the black minds into this fear that Republicans are just bad. But when you look at the history of Republicans, from Abraham Lincoln freeing slaves to Justin Warrenberg, who was appointed by a Republican, who served on the Supreme Court, who ruled separate schools are unconstitutional. If you look all the way down to Richard Nixon, actually Richard Nixon started the whole, if you want to call it affirmative action, where blacks were excluded from corporate America. And I don't believe in quotas and I don't believe in affirmative action. I do believe if you give a person fair opportunity, because, you know, clearly we have a history of where blacks have been discriminated against from job and housing and other things. And I don't think it's all the way completely out of the way. I think there's still some tendencies. However, though, but it was Richard Nixon who broke the barrier when more and more blacks started going into corporate America. Normally they would just be school teachers or those jobs that they were more than qualified for. However, if you come on down to Bob Dole and Ronald Reagan, the Martin Luther King birthday, those Republicans shepherded that in. And even to the Martin Luther King statue that was recently erected in Washington, well, my good friend J.C. Watts, who was in leadership in the House when the House was controlled by Republicans, and Speaker Gingrich was there, they're the ones who got the funding, not John Lewis. They're the ones who got the funding through the House. And, you know, neither one of them were invited to speak. They had Obama and Bill Clinton. And so it's kind of ironic how the Republican Party has been defined. And once you become defined, you become confined to that definition. And the liberal media just, you know, I see them, they'll take a black Republican and put them on CNN and have them talk about how bad Donald Trump is. That wasn't by fault. I mean, that wasn't by accident. That's by design. They put blacks on there. Trump is a racist. Trump is a racist. And so black people hear that. But, you know, it's kind of interesting. Not one single liberal national organization has called me and asked me to come in here to ask why did I support Donald Trump. They called Stacey Abrams, but they didn't call me because I don't fit their narrative.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I'd be interested to get your thoughts on one of my on this. I'm a big believer of self-determination, in that if we're going to see this kind of an exit in the black community from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party, then it's going to have to be largely because of what happens in the black community. And so, Mike, can you hear me okay?
Now it's better. Getting better now.
I'm sorry. So, you know, for someone like me, obviously that I'm white, right, and I'm not in the Black community, what kind of role would someone like me have in helping people in your community have free thought and kind of lead the plantation in the way of the Democratic Party to the Republican Party?
Well, can I tell you, you do have characters on both sides that get to the far extreme. And there have been some Republicans who've said things that are just stupid and ignorant. And the liberal media blows that up. But when someone from the Democrat left side says something, then they don't talk about that. I look at what happened in Virginia. What the president was saying about that situation was completely taken out of context. And it fed that narrative that President Trump is a racist. Christian, your experience with CJ and your experience with everyday African Americans, you find out that you have things in common when you just talk. I think this new generation, the best chance to change or to bring into the fold is the newer generation, because they don't come from the old days when they really did have some discrimination issues. I mean, a lot more than there are now. And you have an environment where, can you imagine that my dad, who fought in World War II, came back home to this country, and in Georgia, if he wanted to, he couldn't vote in the Democratic primary, and he certainly couldn't go into a public library. I mean, it was only to the 50s where blacks could only have a certain day to go to the state capitol. Other than that, they would have to observe from across the street over near City Hall. And so this new generation has not, they haven't experienced that. And so they're more open. The millennials are some very unusual young people, but they're going to get older and they're going to have to earn a living like the rest of us and pay bills and see that everything's not for free and you have to earn things. But I think that's the best way you can capture the new group coming into the Republican Party. If you look now, when I look at the various group Black voices, many of them are young, a whole new different generation. And so I think that's the feeding ground where we can talk to about having at least an independent thought to look both ways before they cross.
Yeah, and so for everything that you've kind of stated here today, I think it's interesting that you're actually remaining a Democrat. So last I heard is that you're not being an independent or a Republican. So kind of given everything that you come out and have stated, why are you remaining a Democrat?
Well, see, honestly, Christian, and to all your viewers there, it's really not about party as it is what your values are, what your principles are. I saw a lot of Democrats leave and go to the Republican Party, and I serve some of them down in the legislature, and I'm a lot more conservative than they are. And so that's not really the issue. But it's good to be party affiliated because, you have this platform and you have your values that you see that's important to you, and most people you have in common with. But, if you go too partisan, then we get into gridlock, which is what we're having in Washington right now. Nancy Pelosi, she's just out to lunch. I mean, anything the president come up with, they just want to fight it. That just doesn't make any sense. But I also saw on the other side where there were individual Republicans who fought things too, just because the Democrat had an idea. So, I have a history of being independent. I have a history of working across the aisle to get things done. Again, I didn't leave the party left me. So if anything, they need to be coming back this way. But it's far bigger than party. It's about really being inclusive, about really putting Americans first, and about putting your country first. If you put America first and your country first, party stuff tends to kind of just fall to the wayside, because now you're addressing what's really important, what the American people feel. And that's how I see that.
So let's go ahead and switch gears a little bit. So the Georgia State Assembly, because of the coronavirus, they went ahead and they suspended the General Assembly in, I believe it was March. So they have a June 11th date. I apologize for the stat, I got to here too, but they have a June 11th resume date. There's also a move it up to May. So which, do you support it moving it up to May or moving it at June?
This is something that no one has ever dealt with in our lifetime. And it's so fluid, and it's moving like a live beast. We still don't really know how to cure it. We're still trying to find out how we can at least get that person through that virus period. And so when I look at, we have to look at trying to strike a balance between, which the president is trying to do, and Governor Kemp. They're trying to strike a balance between public safety and keeping people healthy, safe, and saving their lives. At the same time, we have to go to work. People want to go to work. Small businesses, some will never be back in business again. People have mortgages. The unemployment can only last so long. And then you even see within the ranks of some of the unemployment, there are people literally making more by being unemployed and drawing their unemployment than if they had their regular jobs. And so, we have to look at that too. But when I see big businesses, some of them get all this money, and I see small businesses who really need it because they're the backbone of the job market. They create more jobs. It seems like there's been a little of abuse on among some of them, but I don't want to accuse it just appeared, just the appearance of it. I know right now the governor's saying one thing, or I should say the lieutenant governor's saying one thing, and our speaker's saying another. I want to go back to work. I do. I would like to see my colleagues. I want to finish the job, but we're just trying to make sure that we're safe, because if we go back too fast and then people get sick, then there's the media saying, well, look, now blood is on our hands. We should not have gone back in. But I hope we strike a balance where we can get back in. We all have been practicing safety now. We know a lot more about it. We've been educated about it. So taking those proper precautions, I think that can help us a lot. We know we can't shake hands. We know we have to use sanitizer, wear our masks. I think we can do some things and go back in at a reasonable time. Again, I think we have maybe 12 days left in this session, get in and get out. But I want to see America go back to work. I'm hearing people want to go back to work, too many of them. Small businesses want to open, but when you look at the media, because they stir up a lot of fear and things of that nature. So it's a challenge. Nobody has the right answer, Christian, because we don't know quite enough about it. But we do know that we can't continue to stay in our homes. That pot is beginning to boil over. People want to get out for one reason or another. And so I hope that we just trust in our leaders, who I believe Brian Kemp is trying to do the right thing. I believe President Trump is trying to do the right thing. I like how President Trump didn't come with one-size-fits-all models and said, okay, you states should kind of take it. There are some certain federal guidelines, try to stay with them, but at the same time, what's going on in your state. Local governments too, I like that Governor Kemp is having some basic guidelines, but trying to give the flexibility among these local governments. I've run a local government. I can tell you what I experienced in Cobb, what I experienced in DeKalb, and what's going on in South Georgia. We got two different environments. One, I'm a major urban, my county's a major urban populated city. Down there, those counties are less populated. And so there's a big difference there. So they're challenged, but I think we're trying to do the right thing, but there is no right answer or wrong answer in terms of when we should go back.
Yeah, absolutely, and I agree with you there, because I think that we have to get people back to work. And the governor keeps taking a lot of backlash because he's the first governor to get back to work, but someone's got to be first, right? Someone's got to do it, and I appreciate the words there. And so let's go ahead and get to the questions from the chat. So
can I have a Mark Rubio a minute again?
Go ahead. So if you have any questions, go ahead. I see some people have already put theirs in the chat. If something comes up, go ahead and just type it in there. But this one is from Lisa Babbage. And so we have an election obviously coming up in November. And as we know, some people are getting absentee ballots and getting ballots mailed in. Are you concerned about voter fraud? And not just in this primary in May, but also in November, if there is widespread vote buying?
I have mixed emotions and mixed feelings with this. First of all, we have now become so technology driven. We do our banking online. We pay our bills online. A lot of things we're doing online now. There are security measures there, but we always have hackers. Even our current voting system and the one before that, there were some would say that there was some fraud. I don't think we'd ever be 100%. I like the fact that our Secretary of State, and when Brian was Secretary of State, that they tried to make sure that every ballot was counted, every ballot was counted accurately, and the voters had their say. I think we are going to have to start to be open, though, to other ways of voting. We're going to have to think about a lot of different things now as a result of what happened with this pandemic, of how we're going to do business. in the future. And so I don't think the Secretary of State or any others, because they are encouraging people to do more absentee balloting. And we've been doing that from day one. We just begin to see more of it come into place now. And I think it makes sense, because you're telling people not to go out. And we had an election that was supposed to be on May 19th. And we're still telling people, hey, we're not quite ready to go. Well, you're going to have long lines at the polls. You can't have people standing every 6 feet, or else they'll be going from Snellville to Marietta. So, you know, I think encouraging absentee balloting is the best way. I think it's efficient. I think it's about as safe as anything else, about as secure as anything else. We're entering a new age, and I think it makes sense. A lot of people a lot of people have already voted absentee ballot. And we just hope that we don't experience some of the things maybe some others have experienced. But that's always the case when you have an election.
And this next question is from Mitchell Bradley Nemeth. And can you discuss how illegal immigration can suppress wages for African Americans?
Well, I don't think it's just for African Americans. I think for Americans, period. But I want to be clear about something. We are a country of immigrants, and I welcome immigration. But there has to be a process. You have to force the law. You just can't just say, like you at a nightclub and you said you just going to bogart your way in. But at the same time, you can literally see where even among immigrants and illegal immigrants, they are fearful more coming over because it's driving their wages down too. And so I think there's something to be said about that, because when they come over from where they came from and what they can make here is far greater than what they can make back home. And so everyone who has a business trying to find ways to cut costs and wages is one of the ways, but we cannot continue to allow that to happen, because we're undercutting and undermining American workers. And so it does need to be addressed, and that's why immigration reform is so important.
This next question, I'm sorry if I botched your name, but from Farah's Creek. Why do you think so many American blacks are raised in conservative households, yet they constantly vote Democrat?
Wow. You know, on average, it takes 22 days to start or quit a habit. On average, some say. I don't know, but if you are told, you know, Christian, I think you said earlier that you're white. You know, if I said you were black long enough, we would start to think you're black.
Yeah.
You would start to think you're black. So if you hear so much that the Democratic Party is for you, and you really don't hear the other side and say, hold on, when you look at who voted for the Civil Rights Act and the Voters' Rights Act, in proportion to the numbers that were elected, Democrat versus Republicans outvoted Democrats on the Civil Rights Act. And if you just go back and look what Joe Biden did, that was that's not 200 years ago. That was just a few years ago with the Criminal Justice Reform Act. And President Bill Clinton literally twisted some arms of black Democrats to vote for it in Congress. Now, many of them saying that was the biggest mistake they ever made. But again, wanting to be accepted, going along to get along, mine is being hijacked. And I tell you another thing, and I don't mean this in the wrong way, but liberals really do get blacks to think that they're their friends, that they're there to take care of them, and they don't need to think. And who controls most of the media? Liberal whites. How many Fox stations do you have? Think about this. I didn't have a Fox station growing up. Thank God for one now, because now you get a chance to see the other side. And so that's why I said this new generation who's had less experience of the struggle of discrimination, they're seeing things totally different, and they're much more open. That's why if the Republican Party is interested in really recruiting and bringing more African Americans to their party, they need to go where they have the best chance. And where's that? College campuses. That's where they are. And the sad thing now about college campuses, many of them where, the First Amendment used to mean something, but if a speaker comes there and that speaker is not saying what some of the folks on campus want to hear, then they put pressure on school's president, and all of a sudden they cancel that speaking engagement. Why? That's where they were supposed to go and gather as young men and women to hear different views and different sides to start to shape their minds and their ideals and this and that. But if your parents have been raising you one way, you can easily be influenced by others. And so if you look around, we just haven't had the outlets where Black people can get the true story. You know, the heroes have made me believe that they were Democrats and not Republicans. It's unfortunate, but my nephews, my nieces, my daughter, I make sure, hey guys, now you make up your own mind, but this is real. Go look at it. Don't ask me. You go and look at it. Even in the public school system, it's almost liberal leaning as opposed to conservative leaning. And so that's where they're picking it up.
Yeah, and another question that I think is building off of that is, you know, urban centers are predominantly Democrat. And so how does the GOP kind of change the, how do they change the landscape in urban centers? Mostly dominate in urban, and the suburban districts have kind of gone back and forth, but urban areas for so long have been Democrat.
Well, you know, liberals go into urban areas and say, hey, we're your friend. Let us organize you. Let us do this for you. Let us do that for you. Really, they're doing it for themselves. Republicans have been really spooked. And I'll give you an example. When Mitt Romney was running and he went to the NAACP's conference, he got booed. Well, guess what? I think he really wanted to make an effort to go after African-American votes. But that scared him. So he was shell shocked. So he ran back into the closet. The thing about Donald Trump as a Republican has gone, as far as I can remember my lifetime, has gone in more venues right to the heart of African Americans. Think about it. Here's what people don't realize. Who did Donald Trump used to hang around before he was elected president? Or who used to hang around him? Al Sharpton, Jesse Jackson, Don King. Many of the rappers, what were they saying? Hey, we want Trump's change. You know, they idolized Trump. Trump became a racist when he decided to run for president, and that liberal media saw how much support he had in the Black community. And so when they saw that, they started to craft him as a racist, and that ran Blacks off. Because when you hear that word racist, because they have been victims of racism enough until that word resonates. And the liberal side know that they can get Blacks by using that word. And so Trump is probably the most comfortable president I've known. I would say more comfortable than Obama going into the African-American community.
And this next one is a really interesting one from Ryan Cantor. He says that African Americans are some of the most churched people in the country, but they overwhelmingly go for the party that supports partial birth abortion and transgender lifestyles for small children. It doesn't make sense to me. What is in there?
Let's see. Here's what's interesting. I know the Christian Coalition was a big deal years ago, but Black people have been a coalition of Christians as far as I can remember. I didn't know I was on drugs until I realized one day my mother drugged me to church on Monday, drugged me to church on Tuesday, drugged me to church on Wednesday, drugged me to church on Thursday, and on and on. The Obama era, Obama, in my opinion, was selected by liberal whites to get behind. And they used Obama to further that liberal agenda that included him taking a stand on same-sex marriages, on the bathroom issue, where you go to the bathroom based on what you think you are. But I'm just kind of curious, would Obama let Malia and Sasha go in the bathroom with somebody who is transgender from a man to a woman, and him knowing that? Would he let them go in the bathroom with them and feel comfortable with it? I'm just curious. I don't know. But it was the liberal whites that got behind Obama, and he carried their agenda for them. The same thing that Stacey Abrams is doing right now. And let me say this too. I want to be clear about something. People can be whatever they want to be. That's their choice. But I have a choice, like everybody on here has a choice. And when you say why do blacks, blacks have always been more conservative than whites for the most part. But that liberal Democratic Party has literally taken away what the black fighting struggle was about, and now have them carrying the water for their liberal agenda. They're carrying somebody else's water. They're carrying the water for illegals and don't even know it. Let them in, let them in. Wait a minute. Do you know the impact that is having on your community? And white liberals are thinking, okay, let them in because they're going to end up voting for Democrats because they were the ones who fought to let them in, but they don't know. Most folks who are from the Hispanic Latino community, they have an issue when it comes to abortion. They're very pro-life. That's why you see a lot of Hispanics and Latin Americans vote for Republicans, because that's a single issue for them that's important to them, because they're pro-life. They don't believe in abortions.
This next one's from, so we have time for 2 more questions. This next one is from Abigail. How do you feel about policies like affirmative action that have influenced racial tensions in the United States?
Well, let me tell you, affirmative action came about because black people were just left out. They were. I mean, just go back and look in history. Again, my dad, World War II vet, went into a segregated army. Why? My dad told me that German prisoners at times were treated better than black soldiers. When my dad was in Germany, the white American soldiers would tell the German female women that black soldiers had tails, that they were monkeys. That's a fact. Talk to any black World War II veteran who served over in Germany. That happened. So there was this divide there. Black people were sold as property. I don't know about white people being sold as property in this country, not that long ago. So there was some situation. My mom and dad, and my parents, my dad didn't have opportunity to go to Ivy League school. My dad didn't have the opportunity to play Major League Baseball if he wanted to. He remembered when Jackie Robinson broke the barrier. But then whites had to pick a certain black that had to be able to take that punishment. Well, every black doesn't feel like they have to take that punishment. They want to speak out if someone says something wrong to them. Hank Aaron, the threats, we love and we appreciate Hank Aaron, but you know there were threats to try to keep him from breaking Babe Ruth's record. How stupid that is. And so affirmative action came about really about, okay, let's try to open doors. But what's strange about affirmative action is to help those, it was targeted to help those who have less of an opportunity. And then you have the quota system where quotas are like, well, we're just gonna put a black in it whether they qualify or not, we're just gonna put a black in it. And that perception is all these blacks are getting jobs based on affirmative action and quota system, when in fact, they aren't. But that perception was there. So if a black person got a job, a lot of whites would think, well, he got the job just because he was black. If a black person hires a black person, white people tend to think he did it because he was black. If a white person hires a black person, white people don't have a problem with that. They think it was normal, he was the best qualified for the job. So those things are out there, and they're still out there to a certain extent, so we can't sweep that under the rug. But there are people like you and me and folks who are on this call who see things differently. We want to change that. And so affirmative action came about, it had good intentions, but it got off track because you can't tell a little poor white boy down in South Georgia whose parents, they're blue collar too, and he doesn't have a leg up. He's just as poor as any other black person. But you know what? If he wants to go to the University of Georgia and he applies and he has to deal with, well, wait a minute, I didn't get accepted because they needed to make space for African Americans. Well, in fact, the real problem is those who are living on the legacy program because their parents went there, then they get a leg up because of the legacy program. Well, African Americans didn't have the legacy program, and that your poor white boy didn't have the legacy program either. But it makes him feel like something was taken from him. And so, and by and large, most black people do not believe in quotas. We just want an equal opportunity. You know, isn't it strange? It's got to be, just look, why is it in our country's history, we've only had about, what, 4, at least 5 African-American United States senators? What was that about? You mean there's just none that were qualified? I ran for the United States Senate. The Democratic Party, Harry Reid and Chuck Schumer ignored me. until they found liberal Jim Martin, who had just lost the lieutenant governor's race that was so far to the left, and I was to the right of Saxony on immigration. And I get in the runoff, I get 44% of the vote going in, out of the primary. Jim is behind me by 10 points. And what happens? As opposed to Democratic Party supporting me, they want to support Jim. So they torpedoed my campaign with the liberal media here. But I was far more qualified than he was to be the United States Senator. And so those things are happening. I look at the presidential debate this time around, you know, the Democratic Party talking about diversity. But when you looked at it, they went from a diverse group with 2 black United States senators and a former governor that was African-American. And then when it came down to it, the rules kept them from continuing to be a part of the debates based on the amount of money they raised. And so then they changed the rules and they let a millionaire get in from New York who hadn't started out in the normal debates. So he gets in, the black candidate's off the stage. And then we have an Asian guy who's never held office before. And then we have a guy who was a mayor who represented an area, a town about the size of Marietta, if that many people. How do those 2 people, with their qualifications, get ahead of these 2 African Americans who were United States senators and one that was a former governor, a real chief executive officer? And then we end up with 2 white men. And then what are they talking about doing? Putting illegals first. You know, I mean, these are things that we have to discuss. And I give Sean Hannity the credit and Tucker Carlson. They put that out there. CNN would not put that out there. MSNBC would not put that out there. ABC would not put that out there. Why? Because it takes away from the narrative they want to shape. And so what do you have? So consequently, you still have blacks over here, and they're afraid of, you know, that Republicans are the boogeyman. And they're afraid to step out like I stepped out because they don't want to be, you know, literally tarred and feathered.
And then we have one more question and then a couple closing remarks. So with the coronavirus, this is obviously taking a big hit with our spending and our GDP, but it doesn't get a whole lot of coverage, and it doesn't seem like a whole lot of people care about that. So, I mean, should we care about this growing deficit because of the coronavirus? And if so, what should we do about it?
You mean the financial deficit that we're experiencing?
Yes.
And the budget to pay for it?
Yeah, the financial, with the GDP.
Okay. You know, again, we're treading on waters that nobody in the past 70 years have had to tread. It's new territory, and nobody really knows what to do. So everybody's just kind of moving on one hand by the seat of their pants. Obviously, we needed to help those American families, those who couldn't go to work, small businesses who had to close their doors. And you're seeing all these checks being written by the federal government. And we know that our children, great-grandchildren will have to pay for it. But you know what? What do? What's the magic answer? We'll look back 20 years from now and say this and say that, but we're in the now right now. And so I just think our leaders are doing the best they can. I'm not really as much worried about the GDP as it relates to we should be concerned about it. What I'm concerned about right now is saving people's lives, trying to strike that balance between saving people's lives and trying to do the best we can to keep the economy going so people can get back on their feet, so we can address those financial issues down the road, address growing our revenues again and being able to pay off some of this debt. But right now, you know, it's every man on deck. Every man and woman on deck, I should say.
Well, absolutely. Well, that's going to conclude our event tonight, right on time at 9 o'clock. I want to thank everyone for tuning in. I can't think of a better person to have for our very first virtual meeting in Representative Vernon Jones. Thank you so much for joining us. Your story is very inspiring. I apologize for the static. It's I've been hearing it too, but we will get to the bottom of that for our next meeting. So go ahead and thank you so much for everybody tuning in, and stay tuned for our next meeting. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Hope you have me back too.
Thank you. Absolutely. Good night, everybody.
Peace out.